So I purposely held off on making this review for a couple of reasons, but the first being that I wanted to give Season 1 a rewatch because there were a bunch of things in the premiere that I was like, oh, who's this character, and I wonder if that's going to be important later, and all that. And then after rewatching Season 1, I'm like, oh, this was something absolutely set up in Season 1. It's a good thing I didn't make the review and talk about that because I would have sounded like an idiot. So yeah, but it's really great to have Stargirl back after an entire year. Season 1 was a huge surprise and probably one of the most planned out seasons we've ever had in a comic book show, but after Season 1 I kind of forgot how awesome and to a degree wholesome this show was, and that was all brought back this episode, and I'm just really glad it's back. Like, it's something that's just really nice to have again. But before getting deeper into this review, I just want to ask if you can subscribe if you're not already. I make Marvel and DC videos every single week, and new subscribers really do help to keep up the motivation to make new videos. The channel has actually been doing pretty good lately. I think we've gained like 50 subs in the last 30 days, so new subs are always welcome. But the season opened with a setup for the villain Eclipso, who is likely going to be the main antagonist of the season, or one of the biggest antagonists of the season. That opening was one of the creepiest things we've seen on the entire show, but it really worked. Like, it was very well done. And it also somehow tied to Charles Mid-Nite, or at least Mid-Nite's family, who is Dr. Mid-Nite. Now, I'm sure this is something that is going to be brought up again later on in the season, but I'm not crazily good with JSA lore in the comics, not near as much as I am with Justice League members, but I can't think of any way this would tie Eclipso to Mid-Nite, so I'm really intrigued to see how this plays out. But also, just like in Season 1, the show has an extremely dark opening that then jumps to a really upbeat or heroic song playing while we get the Stargirl opening graphic. That happened. At least half of the episodes last season would have a crazily dark, depressing opening and then jump to a really upbeat song playing while the Stargirl opening jumps in our face, which, hey, it works for the show, so. But I also just want to talk about something a lot of the audience was really worried about going into Season 2, and that is the fact that a ton of people were worried that Season 1's HBO level quality wouldn't be maintained, since the show is now airing exclusively on the CW, rather than on both CW and on DC Universe. But this premiere is definitive proof that the budget, the writing, and everything that made Season 1 so special seems to be just as prevalent here. I mean, I don't know why people were worried in the first place, considering Superman and Lois is also airing exclusively on the CW, has that budget, care, and writing that Stargirl Season 1 has, but people needed assurances, and this episode is that assurance. Honestly though, it is sort of unfair that you have the other shows also air alongside these ones. Like, Stargirl and Superman and Lois feel very much like they are HBO shows, and the cinematography, the effects, the writing, it's all top tier. It's all what you would expect from a HBO level show. And then you have things like Flash airing alongside them, and it just makes Flash look even worse by comparison, because it's so weird to go from an episode of Stargirl to an episode of Flash. It would be amazing if Flash Season 8 somehow got some of that upgrade that makes Stargirl so good, but just sucks, honestly. Flash really does deserve, more, I guess. But overall, it didn't feel like a crazy amount happened this episode. It more so felt like a brief catch-up with the main characters and sort of outlining where some of the plot will be heading this season. We only got to see Sylvester for one scene, and that scene fell in the very middle of the episode, so it was a little weird. I feel that scene either should have been an end of episode stinger or maybe held off until the episode he has more screen time in, because it's kind of weird to have just a scene randomly in the middle of the episode focusing on him and then not have him show up again at all in the episode. But it seems like he's looking for Pat. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I wonder if the woman Sylvester is talking to is actually Mike's mother, which would probably play into the fact that Mike seems to be playing a lot more importance in this season going forward. Just talking about Mike for a sec, I really am intrigued by the fact that Cindy is adding Mike to her list of recruits of ISA members. So this means she obviously knows a decent bit about him, and 2, I wonder if this means she knows Mike is the kid or a relative of an actual ISA member. Like, is that woman Sylvester met secretly tied to the ASA, or maybe the sister or something of an ASA member, and so Mike is sort of a legacy in that regard? It also could be that Cindy is just recruiting Mike because she knows it's an easy way to get revenge or get inside the heads of Pat, Courtney, and the rest of the JSA. There's another theory that my good friend Darren, aka Infotex, you should definitely subscribe to if you're not already, by the way, but he said that Eclipso might take over Mike's, and that is why Cindy is trying to recruit him, which is something I could definitely see happening as well. Honestly, there's a whole lot of ways this season could go with him, but I'm really excited to see which route the show takes, because Mike was one character who sort of got sidelined a lot in Season 1, so it would be cool to see that he's obviously stepping up here. The prospect of him being a villain while the rest of the characters are heroes is also kind of awesome to think about. Mike also shouted out his best pal Jakeem, aka Jakeem Thunder, who will likely take up that pink Thunderbolt pen whenever he shows up in the show. And I also really like how the show just sets up important characters so far in advance like this. In terms of the rest of the new ISA that Cindy's recruiting, I wouldn't be incredibly surprised if this is more of a setup for Season 3, like Eclipso on his own with maybe the Shade from the end of last season, and the Gambler, and maybe even Solomon Grundy are the real enemies this season, with Cindy putting together her young ISA throughout the season, and then they are like ultimately the big bads next season when we have a bigger JSA with the likes of Jakeem and Jade, now that she's been introduced as well. Speaking of Jade, that fight scene with her at the end was great, and I think we're going to see the character join up with the JSA fairly quickly, which I'm really happy about because it does feel like the team is kind of lacking enough good fighters, and if they're going to fight another ISA, they're going to need all the help they can get. And I'm also really interested to see how deep with the Green Lantern lore they go, because I don't know, I don't think we're going to see Alan Scott anytime soon, but we also didn't see him die in any of the flashbacks, so maybe he still is alive out there. We're also getting an episode completely focused on the old JSA. I believe that is going to be episode 9, since John Wesley Shipp, who's playing Jay Garrick, was filming for that one. So it'll be awesome if we see Alan Scott as well as the real Dr. Mid-Nite, the real Arrowman, the real Wildcat, and all these characters together. So I'm very excited for that episode. It's definitely probably the most hyped I am for a DC episode in the back half of the year. Like, even out of the Flash crossover episodes, I think that the JSA focused episode of Stargirl season 2 is going to just slightly top those crossover episodes. But with the rest of the JSA, there wasn't a crazy amount. Rick is looking for Solomon Grundy, and I have to admit I'm not really too invested in the story or where it goes. Bess is trying to make Chuck inside the goggles get his memories back or something, and that could be cool, but again, I'm not too invested in that. And then Yolanda is having serious PTSD from killing Brainwave, which this is probably going to play a serious role in the Eclipso storyline, since the Eclipso likes to possess people who are kind of super angry or super in pain or something, so that's probably why they're showing Yolanda having to face so much of this. Courtney, and by extension Brec herself, were a serious highlight of the episode to me. I thought she was fine in season 1, but unfortunately I felt she was kind of one of the weaker characters on the whole show, which it was kind of annoying to me that like one of the weakest characters on the show was actually the main character. But this time around I thought she was an absolute delight and very improved from last season, so I'm really happy about that. The show also just needs huge props for its willingness to dig deep into DC lore. Like, we had a reference to a wizard called Merlin on a theater, which that theater was just a huge haven for Easter eggs last season. Like, every episode there'd be some new obscure reference on the top of that theater. And then we had a great scene where Pat and Courtney are talking about old ISA villains, and Pat's like, oh, Flash banished him to an alternate timeline, or Green Lantern destroyed him in the 80s, and that was all really fun to kind of talk about. I love when they kind of do that. But honestly, this was a great start to the season. We just sort of caught up with everyone, and we kind of know the direction of the season will go in. I'm really excited to see what comes next, and this is definitely going to be my favorite weekly show once Superman and Lois closes out this coming week. But how did you feel about this episode? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What are your predictions for the upcoming season? And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, share, and all of that. I hope you have a great day.